The dust swirled across the weathered porch as Willow Reed stared out at the empty road that had swallowed her children just hours before. Her fingers white knuckled around the letter from the territorial judge that had shattered her world. The year was 1879, and in Kelton, Utah, a woman's rights to her own children were as fragile as the spring wildflowers that dotted the harsh landscape. Willow had built a life in this railroad town after escaping her marriage to Harold Spencer, a man whose charm had dissolved into cruelty faster than salt in hot water. 2 years she'd managed on her own with 5-year-old Emma and 7-year-old Thomas, working as a seamstress, creating a home in the small cottage behind Mrs. Pemberton's boarding house. 2 years of peace shattered in an instant when Harold returned with the law on his side, claiming she was unfit, claiming she was immoral, claiming everything but the truth that he'd come for the children to punish her for leaving him. A tear slid down her cheek, cutting a path through the dust that had settled there. She'd have to find them. She'd have to get them back. But how could a woman with no money, no standing, and no husband fight against a man like Harold Spencer? The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. A tall figure on horseback emerged from the golden haze of dust, his silhouette growing more distinct as he approached. The stranger rode a magnificent chestnut stallion, his broad shoulders squared against the setting sun. As he drew closer, Willow could make out the weathered features of his face beneath the brim of his Stetson, a face that seemed carved from the same rough stone as the mountains that surrounded Kelton. "Evening, madam," he said, his voice deep and steady as he tipped his hat. "Name's Finn Ironwood. I've come looking for Mrs. Pemberton's boarding house." Willow hastily wiped the tears from her face. "You've nearly found it. It's just up ahead on the right. I'm the seamstress. I have the cottage out back." His blue eyes, sharp as a hawk's, took in her tear-stained face, the crumpled paper in her hand, and the desolation in her posture. "Seems like you're having a harder day than most," he observed, swinging down from his horse with a grace that belied his tall frame. "It's nothing that should concern a stranger," Willow replied, folding the paper and tucking it into her apron pocket. She'd learned the hard way that men's sympathy often came with expectations. "Fair enough," he said, not pushing. "I'll be staying in town a spell." "Judge Parker sent me to help Sheriff Mills with some legal matters." Willow's head snapped up. "You're a lawman." "Was a Texas Ranger for a time," he answered, stroking his horse's neck. "Now I work with the federal courts as a legal agent of sorts. Not quite a lawyer, not quite a marshal, somewhere in between." Hope fluttered in Willow's chest like a trapped bird. "Mr. Ironwood," she began, her voice steadier than she felt, "if you have knowledge of the law, I wonder if I might ask for a moment of your time tomorrow." "I'd pay for your counsel, of course." Finn studied her, his gaze neither unkind nor particularly warm. "No need for payment. I can spare some time in the morning if you'd like to explain your situation." "Thank you," Willow said, relief washing over her like cool water. "I'll make breakfast." 7 o'clock, he nodded, gathering his horse's reins. 7 it is, Mrs. Reed, Willow Reed." She didn't correct his assumption about her marital status. Here in Kelton, she'd always been the Widow Reed. It was simpler, safer that way. "Until tomorrow, then, Mrs. Reed." With another tip of his hat, Finn Ironwood continued toward the boarding house, leading his horse behind him. Willow watched him go, allowing herself the first fragile bloom of hope. Perhaps this man, this stranger who carried the weight of the law in his saddlebags, could help her fight for her children. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains of Willow's cottage as she prepared a simple but hearty breakfast of biscuits, gravy, and eggs. Her hands worked automatically, her mind elsewhere with Emma and Thomas, wondering if they had slept, if they were frightened, if Harold had been kind to them, or if he'd shown them the same cold fury he'd often directed at her. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Finn Ironwood stood on her porch, his tall frame filling the doorway. In the clear morning light, she could see him better, the lines around his eyes speaking of long days in the sun, a thin scar cutting through his right eyebrow and beneath the rough exterior, an intelligence that reassured her. "Good morning, Mr. Ironwood. Please come in." She gestured to the small table where she'd set 2 places. "Mrs. Reed," he acknowledged, removing his hat as he ducked through the doorway. "That smells mighty fine." "It's the least I can do for your time," she replied, serving the food as he settled into a chair that seemed too small for his frame. They ate in silence for a few minutes, Willow trying to gather her thoughts, to find the right words to explain her situation without revealing too much of the shame and pain of her past. "Now," Finn said, setting down his fork after finishing his meal, "what's the trouble that had you in tears yesterday evening?" Willow took a deep breath. "My children were taken from me yesterday, by their father, my former husband." Finn's expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened with interest. "I take it this wasn't a friendly arrangement between the 2 of you?" "No," she said, her hands twisting in her apron. "Harold, Mr. Spencer, and I have been separated for 2 years. I left him in Denver and came here to start anew with my children. And he suddenly decided he wants them back." "He doesn't want them," Willow said bitterly. "He wants to hurt me. The children are just his means of doing so." "That's a serious accusation," Finn observed, his tone measured. "What makes you so certain of his motives?" Willow hesitated, then decided that if this man was going to help her, he needed the truth. "Harold Spencer is not a kind man, Mr. Ironwood. Our marriage was difficult. He has a temper, especially when he drinks, which is often. He never showed much interest in the children when we were together. He viewed them more as obligations than as people to love. Did he ever hurt them?" "Or you?" Finn asked directly. Willow looked away. "Me, yes. Them not physically, but his words could be cruel." Emma was too young to really understand, but Thomas became very quiet around his father. "And yet a judge granted him custody," Finn mused, leaning back in his chair. "He had a letter from Judge Willis in Salt Lake City," Willow explained, retrieving the crumpled paper from where she'd left it on the sideboard. "He claims I abandoned him, that I'm an unfit mother because I work and leave the children with neighbors during the day. He told the judge I entertain men here." Her cheeks flushed with anger and embarrassment. "It's not true, but Harold can be very convincing when he wants to be." Finn took the letter and read it carefully, his expression unchanging. "This isn't a formal custody order," he said finally. "It's a preliminary ruling based on your husband's testimony alone. You weren't present to defend yourself." "I wasn't notified there was even a case," Willow said. "The first I knew of it was when Harold appeared at my door with the sheriff and this letter, demanding the children." Finn's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's not how the law is meant to work, Mrs. Reed. You have a right to be heard. Did Sheriff Mills read this letter before helping your husband take the children?" "I don't know," Willow admitted. "Everything happened so quickly." Emma was crying, Thomas was trying to be brave, and Harold was. She trailed off, the memory of his triumphant smirk still burning in her mind. "Where has he taken them?" Finn asked, folding the letter and setting it on the table. "He said he was staying at the hotel in Promontory, about 20 miles from here. He said he'd be leaving for Denver in a week, once he'd settled some business." "Mrs. Reed," Finn said carefully, "I need to ask a difficult question. Are you legally divorced from Harold Spencer?" Willow's heart sank. "No, when I left, I simply left. I came here, told people I was a widow. It was easier that way." Finn nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. "That complicates things, but it doesn't make them impossible. Under the law, a husband does have presumptive custody of children in a marriage, but that doesn't mean a mother has no rights, especially if the father is unfit." "Can you help me?" Willow asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. Finn studied her for a long moment. "Yes," he said finally. "I believe I can, but it won't be quick or easy. We'll need to file a formal petition with the territorial court, gather evidence of your fitness as a mother and possibly his unfitness as a father. And most importantly, we need to prevent him from leaving the territory with your children before we can get a hearing." "How do we do that?" Willow asked, a fragile hope beginning to build. First, I'll speak with Sheriff Mills. If he helped enforce an improper order, he needs to understand that. Then I'll ride to Promontory to assess the situation. I need to see what we're dealing with, whether your husband might be reasonable, or if we'll need to use every legal tool available. He won't be reasonable, Willow said with certainty. Then we'll prepare for that, Finn replied, rising from the table. I'll need to know everything, Mrs. Reed. Any witnesses to his behavior, any evidence of your good character and capability as a mother, any documentation you have of your marriage and life with him. Willow nodded, already mentally cataloging the people in Kelton who might speak for her: Mrs. Pemberton, Reverend Johnson, Dr. Collins, who had treated the children for minor illnesses. Mr. Ironwood, she said as he reached for his hat, may I ask why you're willing to help me? You don't know me. Finn paused, his expression softening slightly. I've seen what happens when the law is applied without care or conscience, Mrs. Reed. I've seen children used as pawns in games adults play. I don't much care for it. He placed his hat on his head. Besides, Judge Parker would have my hide if I ignored a clear miscarriage of justice right under my nose. Thank you, Willow said simply, unable to find words adequate for her gratitude. Don't thank me yet, he cautioned. We've got a long road ahead. I'll return this evening to let you know what I've learned. As he left, Willow allowed herself to truly hope for the first time since Harold had appeared at her door. She didn't know this Finn Ironwood, didn't know if he was truly as capable as he seemed, but he was offering help when she'd thought herself completely alone. For now, that would have to be enough. The day crawled by as Willow tried to focus on her sewing work. She had 3 dresses to finish for the station master's wife and daughters, but her stitches lacked their usual precision, her mind constantly wandering to Emma and Thomas, to what Finn might be discovering, to whether Harold might already be making plans to leave earlier than he'd said. The sun was setting when she heard the now familiar sound of Finn's horse approaching. She set aside her sewing and met him at the door before he could knock. Mr. Ironwood, she greeted him, searching his face for any hint of news. Mrs. Reed, he replied, his expression giving nothing away. May I come in? She stepped aside, noticing that he moved more stiffly than he had that morning, as though he was sore or tired. Of course. Would you like some coffee or something stronger? Coffee would be welcome, he said, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair, which was damp with sweat despite the cool evening. Willow busied herself with the coffee pot, trying to contain her impatience. When she turned back, Finn had settled at the table, a small notebook open before him. I spoke with Sheriff Mills, he began as she set a steaming cup before him. He admits he didn't read the letter carefully. He assumed it was a proper court order. He's not happy about being misled. And Promontory? Willow asked, sitting across from him. Did you find them? Finn nodded, taking a sip of coffee before answering. Your husband and children are at the Grand Hotel. The children appeared well, physically at least, though the boy seemed withdrawn. The girl was asking for you. Willow's heart clenched at the image of Emma asking for her mother. Did you speak with them? No, Finn said. I observed from a distance. I didn't want to alert your husband to our plans. I did, however, have a very informative conversation with the hotel barkeep. His mouth tightened. Your husband has already made quite an impression in Promontory. He's running a tab at the bar that's raising eyebrows, and he's been leaving the children alone in their room while he drinks and plays cards each evening. That sounds like Harold, Willow said bitterly. Did you learn anything about his plans to leave? That's where things get interesting, Finn replied. According to the barkeep, Spencer's been asking about train schedules to Denver, but he's also mentioned possibly heading to San Francisco instead. He's been vague about his departure date, sometimes saying a week, sometimes saying as soon as he concludes his business. We need to stop him before he leaves, Willow said urgently. Agreed. I've already set some things in motion. I sent a telegraph to Judge Parker explaining the situation. He's arranging for a hearing in Ogden day after tomorrow. I also had a friendly chat with the station master in Promontory. He'll alert us if Spencer tries to purchase tickets. What about tonight, tomorrow? Willow asked. What if he leaves before the hearing? Sheriff Mills has agreed to ride to Promontory first thing in the morning with a stay order I've drafted. It's not perfect legal procedure, but it will prevent Spencer from leaving the territory with the children until the court hearing. If he tries to defy it, he'll be arrested. Relief flooded through Willow. So we'll get our hearing and the judge will listen to my side of the story. Yes, Finn said, but we need to be prepared. Spencer will undoubtedly portray you in the worst possible light. We need character witnesses, evidence of your stability and capability as a mother, and if possible, evidence of his unsuitability. I've been thinking about that all day, Willow said. Mrs. Pemberton will speak for me. She's seen how I care for the children. Reverend Johnson, too, and Dr. Collins has treated both children. He can attest to their health and well-being under my care. Good, Finn nodded approvingly. What about witnesses to Spencer's character or behavior? Anyone who knew you both in Denver, Willow thought for a moment. There was a neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, who helped me the night I left. She found me after Harold had been particularly angry. She helped bandage my wounds and watched the children while I packed our things. Would she be willing to testify? I don't know, Willow admitted. She was afraid of Harold too. We can send a telegraph, Finn suggested. It's worth trying. They spent the next hour planning their strategy, Finn taking detailed notes as Willow recounted her history with Harold, their courtship when she was just 18. And he was a promising 26-year-old business partner in her father's mercantile store. Their initially happy marriage. The gradual emergence of his controlling nature and temper, especially after he began to gamble and drink more heavily following some business losses. He was careful at first, Willow explained. The bruises were where no one would see. He always apologized, promised to change. When I became pregnant with Thomas, things improved for a while. But after Emma was born, money became tighter and he started drinking more again. Did anyone else witness his behavior? Finn asked gently. Thomas saw more than I wanted him to, Willow said, her voice breaking slightly. I tried to shield the children, but they heard the shouting. A few times, Harold's business partner, Mr. Greaves, came to the house when Harold was in one of his rages. He pretended not to notice, but he knew. Is Greaves still in Denver? As far as I know, they had a falling out shortly before I left, another business venture gone wrong. Finn made another note. He might be willing to speak against Spencer if they're no longer associates. The conversation continued until Willow's coffee pot was empty and the lamp was burning low. Finally, Finn closed his notebook and stood. You should try to rest, Mrs. Reed. Tomorrow we'll gather statements from your witnesses here in Kelton. I'll send telegraphs to Denver and continue preparing our case. The day after tomorrow, we'll travel to Ogden for the hearing. What are our chances, Mr. Ironwood? Willow asked, unable to keep the question inside any longer. Honestly, Finn considered her question carefully. The law traditionally favors fathers in custody matters, he said frankly. But judges are increasingly recognizing the importance of mothers, especially for young children. With evidence of Spencer's unsuitability and your good character, we have a fighting chance. I wouldn't be helping if I didn't believe that, Willow nodded, drawing strength from his steady confidence. Thank you, Mr. Ironwood. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't ridden into Kelton yesterday. Something in his expression shifted, softening almost imperceptibly. Try to get some sleep, Mrs. Reed. Your children need you strong. After he left, Willow sat alone in her quiet cottage, the emptiness of the children's small bedroom a physical ache in her chest. But for the first time since Harold had appeared at her door, she allowed herself to imagine bringing Emma and Thomas home again, to picture their faces when they realized they were back with her for good. With that image holding the worst of her fears at bay, she finally went to bed, determined to be ready for whatever the coming days might bring. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, the kind of autumn day that usually lifted Willow's spirits. Today, however, Her mind was solely focused on preparing for the hearing. She was up before sunrise, putting on her best dress, a simple but well-made navy blue cotton with a white collar that she'd sewn herself. She wanted to look respectable, capable, the very opposite of the morally questionable woman Harold had described to the judge. Finn arrived as promised, bringing news that Sheriff Mills had successfully delivered the stay order to Harold in Promontory. He wasn't pleased, Finn reported with grim satisfaction. Apparently, he made quite a scene at the hotel, but the sheriff made it clear that attempting to leave with the children would result in his arrest. "Did Sheriff Mills see Emma and Thomas?" Willow asked anxiously. "Are they all right?" "He did. Said they seemed well enough, though the girl asked him if he was taking them back to you." Finn's expression softened slightly. Mills told her that a judge was going to decide that very soon. Tears pricked at Willow's eyes at the thought of Emma's hopeful question. She blinked them away quickly. "What do we do today?" "We gather our evidence," Finn replied. "I've arranged meetings with Reverend Johnson, Mrs. Pemberton, and Dr. Collins. They've all agreed to provide written statements, and the Reverend and Doctor will travel to Ogden with us tomorrow to testify in person." The day passed in a flurry of activity as they moved around Kelton, collecting statements and discussing strategy. Finn was thorough, asking each witness specific questions about Willow's character, her care of the children, and their observations of the children's well-being. Willow was touched by the strength of support from people she'd known for only 2 years. Mrs. Pemberton's fierce defense of her work, ethic, and mothering. Reverend Johnson's solemn testament to her moral character. Dr. Collins' detailed account of the children's good health and Willow's attentive care during their occasional illnesses. "You've made quite an impression in Kelton," Finn observed as they left Dr. Collins' office. "People have been kind to me here," Willow said simply. "It's more than kindness," Finn countered. "These people respect you. That will count for something with the judge." They returned to Willow's cottage to organize the written statements and prepare for the next day's journey to Ogden. As the sun began to set, a knock at the door revealed the telegraph boy with 2 messages responses to the inquiries Finn had sent to Denver. Finn read them quickly, his expression growing more satisfied with each line. "Mrs. Calloway has agreed to provide a statement about what she witnessed in Denver. She's sending it by express mail to the courthouse in Ogden. And better still, Mr. Greaves is actually in Salt Lake City on business. He's agreed to travel to Ogden for the hearing." "That's wonderful news," Willow said, relief washing over her. "Harold won't expect them to be involved. The element of surprise can be powerful in court," Finn agreed. "Now we should both get some rest." The train to Ogden leaves at 6 tomorrow morning, and it will be a demanding day. As Finn prepared to leave, Willow found herself reluctant to see him go. His presence had become a steadying force in the chaos of the past 2 days. "Mr. Ironwood," she began hesitantly, "I still don't understand why you've gone to such lengths to help me. Surely Judge Parker would have understood if you'd simply offered some advice and gone about your other business." Finn paused, his hat in his hands, considering her question with the same thoughtful attention he gave to every matter. "When I was a ranger," he said finally, "I saw too many situations where the letter of the law was followed, but justice wasn't served. I joined the federal courts to try to bridge that gap." He looked at her directly, his blue eyes serious. "Your situation struck me as one of those cases. The law might give Spencer certain rights as a husband and father, but any fool can see that separating those children from a loving mother to hand them over to a man who sees them as property isn't justice." Willow was touched by the conviction in his voice. "Still, you could have simply directed me to a lawyer." A small smile touched the corner of Finn's mouth. "Perhaps I have a personal interest in seeing justice done in cases like yours." "What do you mean?" Willow asked curiously. Finn's expression grew distant. "My own mother found herself in a not dissimilar situation when I was a boy. My father was not a gentle man. When she finally gathered the courage to leave him, he used his connections with the local judge to have me placed in his custody. I was 7. Like Thomas, Willow whispered, understanding dawning. What happened? I lived with him for 3 years before my mother finally found a lawyer willing to challenge the custody arrangement. By then, she'd gathered enough evidence of my father's neglect to convince the court. The muscle in his jaw tightened. 3 years is a long time in a child's life. I'm so sorry, Willow said softly. Finn shook his head slightly. It was a long time ago, but I suppose it left me with a certain awareness of these situations. He placed his hat on his head. Get some sleep, Mrs. Reed. Tomorrow will test us both. As he left, Willow felt a new dimension to her understanding of this reserved, capable man who had appeared in her life just when she needed him most. Behind his professional demeanor lay personal wounds that had shaped his sense of justice, wounds that perhaps explained his willingness to champion her cause when others might have turned away. The train journey to Ogden the next morning was tense with anticipation. Reverend Johnson and Dr. Collins joined them, both men solemnly committed to supporting Willow's case. Finn spent most of the journey reviewing his notes and occasionally asking Willow to clarify details of her marriage and life with the children. The judge assigned to our case is Hiram Blackwell, he informed her as the train approached Ogden. He has a reputation for fairness, but he's traditional in his views about family. We need to emphasize that your primary concern is the children's welfare, not any grievance against your husband. That won't be difficult, Willow replied. All I want is my children back where they belong. The Ogden courthouse was an imposing stone building in the center of town. As they climbed the steps, Willow's nervousness threatened to overwhelm her. Finn must have noticed because he paused, turning to face her. Remember, he said quietly, you've done nothing wrong. You're a good mother fighting for your children. Stand tall and speak the truth. The rest will take care of itself. His confidence steadied her, and she nodded, drawing a deep breath as they entered the building. The courtroom was already crowded when they arrived. Harold sat at the front with a slick-looking lawyer Willow didn't recognize. He turned as they entered, his handsome face hardening into a scowl when he saw her. She forced herself to look away, focusing instead on the empty bench where the judge would soon sit. "Where are Emma and Thomas?" she whispered to Finn. "Likely with a court officer in another room," he replied. "The judge will decide whether to speak with them privately." Before she could respond, a side door opened and Judge Blackwell entered. Everyone rose as the bailiff called the court to order. The judge was older than Willow had expected, with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He surveyed the courtroom with sharp eyes before taking his seat. "We're here in the matter of custody for the minor children Thomas and Emma Spencer," he announced. "I understand Mr. Spencer has been granted preliminary custody based on claims that Mrs. Spencer abandoned the marital home without cause and has been living in a manner unsuitable for childrearing." Harold's lawyer stood. "That's correct, Your Honor. My client has provided sworn statements attesting to Mrs. Spencer's desertion and moral failings." "And Mrs. Spencer challenges this characterization?" the judge asked, turning to where Willow sat with Finn. Finn rose. "Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Reed, the name my client has been using, left her husband due to his persistent physical abuse and neglect of his family. She has been providing a stable, loving home for the children in Kelton for the past 2 years, while Mr. Spencer has made no attempt to contact or support them until this sudden custody claim, which we believe is motivated by a desire for revenge rather than concern for the children's welfare." Judge Blackwell's bushy eyebrows rose slightly. "Those are serious allegations, Mr. Ironwood. I presume you have evidence to support them." "We do, Your Honor," Finn confirmed. "We have witnesses to Mrs. Reed's exemplary care of the children, as well as to Mr. Spencer's history of violence and current unsuitable behavior." "Very well," the judge said. "Mr. Spencer's counsel will present first, followed by Mrs. Spencer's." Harold's lawyer, a Mr. Thornton, painted a picture of Harold as a devoted husband and father betrayed by a wife who had grown restless with domestic life. He described how Harold had searched tirelessly for his family, only to discover that Willow had been living under a false name, working outside the home and leaving the children with various neighbors while she earned her living as a seamstress. "A mother's place is in the home, Your Honor," Thornton concluded smoothly. "By abandoning that sacred duty and her lawful husband, Mrs. Spencer has demonstrated that she is not fit to raise these impressionable children." When it was their turn, Finn methodically dismantled this portrayal. He called Reverend Johnson, who testified to Willow's regular church attendance with the children and her contributions to community charity work. Dr. Collins described the children's excellent health and Willow's attentive care during their illnesses. Mrs. Pemberton, who had arrived by a later train, spoke warmly of Willow's dedicated mothering and the happy, well-adjusted nature of the children. Then came the witnesses Harold hadn't expected. Mr. Greaves, his former business partner, described Harold's gambling habits, his increasing reliance on alcohol, and his notorious temper that had cost them business relationships. Most damning was his account of arriving at the Spencer home one evening to find Harold in a drunken rage, Willow with a bruised face trying to shield the children, and the furniture overturned. Harold shifted uncomfortably in his seat, shooting venomous looks at Greaves as the testimony continued. Finally, the court clerk read Mrs. Calloway's statement, which detailed the night she had found Willow bleeding and bruised, how she had helped her pack and flee with the children, fearing for their safety if they remained. Throughout it all, Willow sat straight-backed and composed, though her hands trembled slightly in her lap. When Finn called her to testify, she spoke clearly about her marriage, her reasons for leaving, and her life with the children in Kelton. She didn't embellish or exaggerate Harold's cruelty. The simple truth was damning enough. "I don't hate Harold," she concluded, looking directly at the judge rather than at her former husband. "I only want what's best for Emma and Thomas. They need stability, safety, and love. I've provided that for them for the past 2 years, while their father made no attempt to even contact them. I'm asking the court to allow me to continue caring for them, to allow them to remain in the home and community where they've been thriving." Harold's rebuttal testimony was belligerent, his carefully cultivated charm slipping as he denied the abuse allegations and insisted that a father had the right to his children regardless of what a wife might claim. "She's turned them against me," he insisted, his voice rising. "Filled their heads with lies because she was too selfish and weak to be a proper wife. The law gives me the right to my children, and I demand that right be upheld." The judge's expression grew increasingly stern as Harold's testimony continued. When both sides had presented their cases, Judge Blackwell announced that he would interview the children privately before making his decision. "The court will recess for 1 hour," he declared, rising from the bench. The wait was excruciating for Willow. She sat beside Finn on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, unable to eat the sandwich he had procured for her, her thoughts with Emma and Thomas as they spoke with the judge. What if Harold has frightened them into saying what he wants? She worried aloud. What if they're too afraid to tell the truth? Judge Blackwell is experienced in talking with children, Finn reassured her. He'll be able to see beyond any coached responses. Harold and his lawyer stood at the far end of the corridor, speaking in low, urgent tones. Occasionally, Harold would glance in their direction, his expression dark with anger. When they were finally called back into the courtroom, Willow's heart was pounding so hard she felt light-headed. Finn placed a steadying hand briefly on her arm as they took their seats. Judge Blackwell entered, his face solemn as he took his place on the bench. The courtroom fell silent. "I have reached my decision in this matter," the judge announced without preamble. "After reviewing the evidence presented by both parties and speaking with the children, I find Mr. Spencer's allegations of abandonment and moral unsuitability to be without merit. Furthermore, I find compelling evidence that Mrs. Spencer left the marital home due to justified fear for her safety and that of her children. Willow hardly dared breathe as the judge continued. The law traditionally recognizes a father's right to his children, but that right is not absolute, particularly when evidence suggests the father is unfit or that the children's welfare would be compromised in his care. In my interview with Thomas and Emma Spencer, both children expressed a strong desire to return to their mother's care and displayed visible distress at the prospect of remaining with their father. Harold stood abruptly. "This is outrageous. They're my children." "The law, sit down, Mr. Spencer," the judge commanded sharply. "Another outburst like that will result in your removal from my courtroom." Harold subsided, his face flushed with anger. "As I was saying," Judge Blackwell continued, "the welfare of the children is the court's primary concern. Therefore, I am awarding full custody of Thomas and Emma Spencer to their mother, Willow Spencer, with no visitation rights for Harold Spencer at this time." A small, involuntary sob escaped Willow's lips. Finn's hand found hers beneath the table, giving it a brief, reassuring squeeze. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am granting Mrs. Spencer's petition for legal separation on grounds of cruelty, with provisions for child support to be paid by Mr. Spencer in the amount of $15 per month. Mrs. Spencer may continue to use the name Reed if she so chooses. This court will revisit the matter of divorce in 6 months' time should Mrs. Spencer wish to pursue it." Harold surged to his feet again. "I won't pay a cent to that lying woman, and I'll appeal this decision to every court in the territory." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Spencer, you are in contempt of court. Bailiff, remove him until he can compose himself." As Harold was led away, still protesting loudly, the judge addressed Willow directly. "Mrs. Spencer or Mrs. Reed, if you prefer, your children are waiting in my chambers. They're eager to see you." "Thank you, Your Honor," Willow managed to say through her tears. "Thank you so much," the judge nodded. "Mr. Ironwood, you've done good work here today. The court appreciates your efforts to ensure justice was properly served." "Just doing my job, Your Honor," Finn replied, but there was a note of satisfaction in his voice that Willow hadn't heard before. The moment the judge left the bench, Willow turned to Finn, unable to contain her joy and gratitude. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him in a spontaneous embrace. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "I can never repay you for what you've done." For a moment, Finn seemed startled by the contact, his body stiffening slightly. Then, hesitantly, his arms came around her in a brief, awkward return of her embrace before he gently set her back. "You should go to your children, Mrs. Reed," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "They've been waiting for you." Willow nodded, wiping away happy tears as she hurried toward the judge's chambers where Emma and Thomas were waiting. As she pushed open the door, she was nearly knocked over by the force of 2 small bodies hurtling into her arms. "Mama," Emma cried, burying her face in Willow's skirts. "Are we going home now? I told the judge I wanted to go home with you." Thomas, trying to be brave but with tears streaming down his face, simply clung to her tightly, as though afraid she might disappear if he let go. Willow knelt, gathering both children into her arms, inhaling the familiar scent of their hair, feeling the solid reality of them against her heart. "Yes, my darlings," she whispered. "We're going home." Over their heads, she met Finn's gaze as he stood in the doorway watching the reunion. His usually stern face had softened, a hint of something almost like tenderness in his eyes. In that moment, Willow saw not just the capable legal agent who had fought for her children, but a man with his own wounds and his own understanding of what it meant to be separated from those you loved. As they returned to Kelton that evening, the children exhausted but happy, falling asleep against her on the train, Willow found herself wondering what would become of Finn Ironwood now that his work for her was done. The thought of him simply riding away, continuing on to his next assignment for Judge Parker, left her with an unexpected sense of loss. She didn't have long to wonder. The day after their return to Kelton, As Willow was hanging laundry in the yard behind her cottage, the now familiar sound of Finn's horse approached. She turned to find him dismounting, his tall figure silhouetted against the afternoon sun. "Mr. Ironwood," she greeted him, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Mrs. Reed," he nodded, removing his hat. "I wanted to check that everything is well with you and the children after the journey." "We're all fine," she assured him. "The children slept most of yesterday after we returned. Today they're with Mrs. Pemberton, helping her bake bread as a thank you for her testimony." "That's good to hear." He seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. "I also wanted to inform you that Harold Spencer left the territory this morning." Sheriff Mills received word from Promontory that he boarded the eastbound train at dawn. Relief washed over Willow. "So he's truly gone." "For now," Finn cautioned. He made some threats about appealing the decision, but Judge Blackwell's ruling was sound. And without Spencer physically present in Utah, any appeal would be difficult to pursue. "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done," Willow said earnestly. Finn shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I've received new orders from Judge Parker," he said abruptly. "There's a land dispute case in Idaho that requires attention." "Oh," Willow said, trying to hide her disappointment. "When do you leave?" "That's what I wanted to discuss with you." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of his rare moments of uncertainty. "The case doesn't require my immediate presence. I thought perhaps I might remain in Kelton for a time to ensure there are no complications with your situation." Willow studied him curiously. "Is that likely? Complications, I mean." "Not particularly," he admitted, "but it would give me peace of mind to be certain everything is settled properly." A small smile tugged at Willow's lips. "Mr. Ironwood, are you inventing reasons to stay in Kelton?" A flush crept up from his collar, and for the first time since she'd met him, Finn Ironwood looked genuinely discomfited. "That would be highly unprofessional, Mrs. Reed." "Of course," she agreed, trying to suppress her smile, "and you're nothing if not professional." He cleared his throat. "Nevertheless, I find myself reluctant to leave just yet." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with possibilities neither was quite ready to name. Willow considered him thoughtfully, this reserved, principled man who had fought so fiercely for her children. "The children have been asking about you," she said finally. "Perhaps you join us for dinner this evening. If you're to remain in Kelton for a time, they'd like to thank you properly for helping bring them home." Something in his expression lightened. "I'd be honored, Mrs. Reed." "Willow," she said impulsively, "if you're staying in Kelton, you should call me Willow." He hesitated, then nodded. "Finn," he offered in return, his deep voice softening on the single syllable of his name. "Until this evening then, Finn," she said, the name feeling new and significant on her tongue. As he turned to leave, leading his horse back toward the main street, Willow watched him go with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. For the first time since fleeing Denver with her children, she was looking toward the future with something more than survival in mind. The dinner that evening marked the beginning of a gradual shift in their relationship. Emma and Thomas, initially shy around the tall, serious man who had helped return them to their mother, quickly warmed to Finn's quiet attentiveness. He listened to their stories with genuine interest, answered Thomas's endless questions about his work as a ranger with patience, and even allowed Emma to show him her collection of pretty stones gathered from along the railroad tracks. Over the following weeks, Finn's presence in their lives grew more frequent and natural. He found legitimate legal work in Kelton helping settle property disputes, reviewing contracts for local businesses, assisting with paperwork for homestead claims that justified his extended stay. But it was the evenings spent at Willow's cottage, the Sunday picnics after church, and the quiet conversations after the children were asleep that drew him and Willow closer together. "Why did you become a ranger?" Willow asked one evening as they sat on her porch, the autumn night cool but pleasant. The children were asleep inside, and the distant sounds of Kelton's small nightlife drifted to them on the breeze. Finn considered the question, rolling the coffee cup between his palms. After my mother regained custody of me, we moved to Texas to start fresh. She remarried when I was 16, a good man, a rancher who treated her with kindness and respect. I saw what a proper marriage looked like then, how different it was from what she'd endured with my father. He paused, gazing out into the darkness. When I was 20, a group of rustlers attacked a neighboring ranch. They killed the rancher and his oldest son, left the wife beaten badly. The local sheriff did nothing. Turned out he was being paid to look the other way. The Rangers came in, investigated, brought justice. His expression softened with the memory. I decided then that's what I wanted to do, stand between those who would abuse power and those who couldn't defend themselves. Willow studied his profile in the soft lamplight spilling from her window. You've done exactly that. He shook his head slightly. Not always successfully. The law has its limitations, its blind spots. That's why I moved from the Rangers to working with the federal courts, trying to find the places where the letter of the law and true justice can meet. Like with my children, Willow observed. Yes, he agreed, turning to look at her. Though I have to admit your case became more than just professional concern for me. The admission hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to explore its full meaning. What about you? Finn asked, changing the subject slightly. How did you come to marry Spencer in the first place? You seem too sensible to have been taken in by someone like him. Willow laughed softly. I was 18 and he was charming, handsome, and seemed worldly to me. My father had just taken him on as a junior partner in his store. Harold could quote poetry and talked about the places he'd traveled. I mistook his possessiveness for devotion. She sighed. By the time I understood who he truly was, I was already expecting Thomas. It takes courage to leave a situation like that, Finn said quietly. Many women never manage it. I stayed far too long, Willow admitted. It was only when Thomas started to flinch whenever Harold raised his voice that I realized I had to go, not just for myself, but for them. I couldn't let them grow up thinking that was what a marriage should be, what a father should be. Finn's hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers with gentle firmness. You did the right thing, the hard thing, but the right one. They sat in companionable silence after that, hands linked, each lost in their own thoughts as the stars wheeled overhead. As autumn deepened toward winter, the residents of Kelton grew accustomed to seeing the tall legal agent and the seamstress together. They watched with knowing smiles as Finn helped Willow carry packages from the general store, as he built shelves in her cottage, as he taught Thomas to whittle and patiently braided Emma's hair when Willow was busy with a difficult sewing commission. For her part, Willow found herself looking forward to Finn's arrival each day, missing his steady presence when business occasionally took him to nearby towns. She appreciated his quiet strength, his thoughtful conversations, the way he respected her independence while offering support without being asked. Most of all, she treasured the way he was with her children, neither trying to replace their father nor keeping his distance, but building his own relationship with them based on mutual respect and genuine affection. It was Thomas who first addressed the changing nature of their family one snowy December evening. Finn had stayed for dinner, then remained to help Willow prepare for the Christmas bazaar at the church, cutting patterns for the decorative pillowcases she was sewing to sell. Mr. Ironwood, Thomas said seriously as Willow tucked him into bed, do you like living at Mrs. Pemberton's boarding house? Finn looked up from his work, surprised by the question. It's comfortable enough. Why do you ask? Thomas glanced at his mother, then back to Finn. It's just that you're here most of the time anyway. Wouldn't it make more sense for you to live here with us? Willow felt her cheeks flush hot. Thomas, that's not an appropriate question. Why not? Thomas persisted with the frank curiosity of a 9-year-old. He helps with the firewood and fixes things around the house. He teaches me things and reads to Emma. Johnny Miller's father does those things and he lives with them. That's different, Willow explained awkwardly. Johnny's father is married to his mother. Thomas considered this for a moment. So if you married Mr. Ironwood, then he could live here. Emma, who had been listening from her bed across the small room, sat up excitedly. Are you going to marry Mr. Ironwood, Mama? Could he be our new papa? Willow was mortified. She glanced at Finn, expecting to find him equally uncomfortable, but instead found him watching her with an intensity that made her heart skip. Children, that's quite enough, she managed to say. It's late and you both need to sleep. We have church in the morning. Reluctantly, the children settled back into their beds, but as Willow kissed them goodnight, Emma whispered, I hope you do marry him, Mama. He makes you smile again. When Willow returned to the main room, she found Finn standing by the fireplace, his expression thoughtful. I'm so sorry about that, she began. Children say the most unexpected things. Do they? Finn asked quietly. Or do they simply say what adults are too afraid to speak aloud? Willow's breath caught. What do you mean? He turned to face her fully. I mean that perhaps Thomas's question isn't as outlandish as you think. Finn. Hear me out, Willow, he requested, taking a step toward her. I've stayed in Kelton far longer than my work requires. We both know that. You wanted to make sure we were safe, that Harold didn't return, she suggested, though she knew there was more to it than that. At first, yes, he acknowledged. But then I stayed because I couldn't imagine leaving. I couldn't imagine not seeing you each day, not watching Thomas grow more confident, not hearing Emma's laugh. Willow's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he must hear it. What are you saying? I'm saying that I love you, Finn said simply, the words all the more powerful for their directness. I love your strength, your kindness, your fierce devotion to your children. I love the family you've built and the life you've created here. And if you'll have me, I'd like to be a part of it, not to replace what was, but to build something new together. Tears sprang to Willow's eyes, unexpected but welcome. The children would be part of this decision, she said, not quite an answer but not a refusal either. Of course, he agreed. I wouldn't have it any other way. I care for them deeply, Willow. I never expected to find a family when I rode into Kelton, but that's what you and the children have become to me. She took a step toward him, then another, until they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. I've been afraid to trust again, she admitted softly. Afraid to believe that something like this could be real. I know, he said, reaching out to take her hand, his touch gentle but sure. And I'll spend as long as it takes proving to you that this is real, that my feelings are real. We don't have to rush. We can take all the time you need. Willow looked up at him, at this man who had fought for her children, who had respected her boundaries, who had never once made her feel less than his equal. In his steady blue eyes, she saw nothing of Harold's possessive intensity, only a deep, abiding care that asked nothing in return. I love you too, she whispered, the words feeling right, feeling true. I didn't expect it, didn't look for it, but somewhere along the way it happened. The smile that transformed Finn's usually serious face was like the sun breaking through clouds. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he bent his head toward hers. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they parted, Willow felt as though something long broken inside her had finally begun to heal. We'll take it one day at a time, Finn promised, his forehead resting against hers. However long it takes. But it didn't take long at all. The children's enthusiastic approval, the community's supportive embrace of their relationship, and their own deepening love made the path forward clear. 2 months later, on a bright February morning in 1880, Willow Reed became Willow Ironwood in a simple ceremony at Kelton's small church, with Emma as her flower girl and Thomas proudly standing beside Finn as his best man. Judge Parker himself traveled from Ogden to perform the ceremony, his official presence ensuring that there could be no legal questions about the validity of the marriage given Willow's previous situation. Harold Spencer, they had learned, had indeed returned to Denver and shown no further interest in challenging the custody ruling his pride, perhaps greater than any actual desire for his children. As Willow and Finn spoke their vows, surrounded by the community that had become their extended family, Willow thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The fear and pain that had driven her from Denver seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by the joy of the present and the promise of the future. Later that evening, after a celebration at the town hall and putting the excited but exhausted children to bed in their new, larger home that Finn had purchased near the edge of town, Willow and Finn stood together on their porch, looking out at the star-strewn Utah sky. Happy? Finn asked, his arm around her waist. More than I ever thought possible, Willow replied honestly, leaning her head against his shoulder. You gave me back my children, and then you gave me a new beginning when I thought those were behind me. You did the hard part long before I arrived, Finn reminded her. You had the courage to leave, to build a life here, to fight for your children. I just helped with the legal details. Willow turned in his arms to face him. You did far more than that, Finn Ironwood, and you know it. You showed me that there are good men in this world, men who use their strength to protect rather than control. You helped me believe in love again. He cupped her face gently in his hands. Then we've given each other precious gifts, because you and the children have shown me that the family I always wanted was possible, not perfect, not without challenges, but real and true and worth fighting for. As they sealed this truth with a kiss, the stars seemed to shine brighter over their home, over the life they were building together, a life founded on respect, on choice, on a love freely given and gratefully received. Spring came early to Kelton that year, bringing with it new beginnings. Finn's work with the federal courts continued, but he arranged his cases to allow him to be home regularly, never wanting to be separated from his new family for long. Willow's sewing business thrived, her reputation for quality work spreading beyond Kelton to neighboring towns. Thomas and Emma bloomed under the stable, loving care of both Willow and Finn. Thomas, no longer the watchful, too serious child who had been forced to grow up too quickly, discovered a passion for books and learning that Finn enthusiastically encouraged. Emma, always the more outgoing of the two, charmed everyone in town with her bright spirit and kindness. As summer approached, bringing with it the first anniversary of Harold's attempt to take the children, Willow found herself reflecting on how completely their lives had transformed in a single year. The fear that had haunted her for so long had finally faded, replaced by a deep contentment and joy in the life she and Finn had created together. It was on a warm June evening, as they sat together on the porch swing after the children were in bed, that Willow shared the news she'd been confirming with Dr. Collins earlier that day. Finn, she said, her voice soft but steady, I'm going to have a baby. His hand, which had been gently stroking her arm, stilled. A baby, he repeated, wonder and joy dawning in his eyes. You're certain? Willow nodded, her own happiness reflected in his face. Dr. Collins says everything looks healthy. The baby should arrive in January. Finn pulled her into his arms, holding her as though she were made of the most precious material on earth. Thank you, he whispered against her hair, for this gift, for our family, for everything. This child will have what Thomas and Emma didn't have at first, Willow said softly. A father who loves them from the very beginning, who will teach them what strength and kindness truly mean. As Finn held her in the gathering twilight, his hand resting protectively over the place where their child grew, Willow felt the last shadows of her past finally disappear. The road that had brought her to Kelton had been difficult and painful, but it had led her to this moment, this love, this family that was both healing and whole. In the years that followed, the Ironwood family would face its share of challenges, Finn's occasional dangerous assignments, the normal trials of raising children, even a brief, final confrontation with Harold Spencer when he passed through Utah 5 years later, now a broken man seeking forgiveness that Willow was finally strong enough to grant, if not for his sake then for her own peace of mind. But through it all, the foundation they had built remained unshakable. Their son, James, born that January night during a rare Utah snowstorm, grew into a strong, thoughtful young man who inherited his father's sense of justice and his mother's compassion. Emma became a teacher, sharing her love of learning with a new generation of Kelton's children. Thomas, combining his mother's practical skills with his stepfather's legal knowledge, eventually became a respected attorney who specialized in helping women secure their rights in difficult situations. And Willow and Finn, their love deepening with each passing year, remained each other's steadfast partners, proving with their lives and their enduring commitment that even from the darkest circumstances, love and justice could emerge triumphant, creating a legacy that would outlast them both. As they celebrated their 30th anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the community that had embraced them so many years before, Willow looked at the man who had ridden into her life when she needed him most and whispered the same words she had spoken on their wedding day. "Thank you for helping me find my way home." Finn's eyes, still as blue and clear as they had been that first day in Kelton though now framed by silver hair, held the same steady love they always had. "We found our way home together," he corrected gently, taking her hand in his. "And what a journey it's been." Indeed, it had been a journey from fear to courage, from loss to abundance, from isolation to family. A journey that had begun with one woman's determination to protect her children and one man's commitment to justice. And that had blossomed into a love story as enduring as the western mountains that had witnessed its beginning.